When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Grease Goblin YouTube channel. Today's video, I wanted to again talk about Maegor and Aenys. I really was enjoying talking about them last week with the video I did with the Maesters, and so I wanted to do a different topic that's also kind of similar around that time. And it's going to be talking about, I think, one of the biggest failures that Aegon the Conqueror had during his reign. I think in a lot of ways, Aegon was a very good ruler and did a lot of things that were beneficial for the Targaryen reign, but there are a couple of things that he didn't do so well, and one of those is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm not going to talk about everything about Aegon's reign that wasn't so good. I'm specifically focusing on one topic. If you guys did want me to make another video, if this video does well enough, I might make another video just talking about Aegon's ability with the faith and how he set up kind of his errors with that problem and why he maybe did that, or kind of just looking at what the rationale was behind that. But I've really been sparked to do a lot of these videos about Maegor and Aenys because of History of Westeros's podcast talking about Fire and Blood. So if you did want to give them a listen, subscribe. I listen to them on Spotify almost exclusively, but you know, they do a great job. I think they're some of the best content on A Song of Ice and Fire in this space, so definitely give them a watch. But before we get into the video, if you guys would like to learn more about A Song of Ice and Fire, or you just enjoy hearing about this type of stuff, I upload quite consistently on here, so consider subscribing. And let's get into it. So I think one of the biggest things that I find is very jarring to me is how Aegon treated his children, specifically Maegor. From an early age, it's very much seen that Maegor did not have much interaction with his father, if at all. It seems like the way things went down was Maegor ended up being much more closer with his mother. That's very apparent in the deaths of Aegon and Visenya. Visenya's death seemed to really hurt Maegor and seemed to really damage his, I guess, his psyche, and also having someone he could really lean on and trust. Whereas when his father passed, it doesn't really feel like Maegor had that type of reaction to his father's death, and I think that's very understandable, right? Maegor was someone that was not really interacting with his father much, right? Because later in Aegon's life, and especially in Visenya's life, what ended up happening is it was kind of like Aegon was in one place and Visenya would be in another. And Visenya and Maegor were almost always together. So what ended up happening is Maegor almost never interacted with his father at all. And you have to see, if you're Aegon, and this is something I just find that like he just didn't do correctly, is he never really bridged that gap, right? You could see that there are factions forming, right? And maybe Aegon thought, oh, Visenya would never do anything to Rhaenys' line and type stuff, but you have to look at this from this point of view, is that Visenya and Aegon were not on good terms. Her son Maegor was growing quite a lot like her. He just at no point ever was he really doing anything for Maegor. Because later, and again in his reign, and as his reign started to develop, Aegon would take Aenys along with these processions around the country, whether that was to go to the north, like White Harbor, Barrowtown, or even Winterfell once, or he would go to other places like in the Westerlands or the Riverlands and the Reach. He never took Maegor. There's no indication here that we see that Maegor went on these, which seems very stupid. Like, what if something did happen to Aenys before Aegon died? Well, Maegor now has not been on any of these. He's not been being groomed to rule, because again, it even seems apparent that Aegon wasn't really teaching Maegor anything anyway. And so I come to this idea, I'm like, why did he keep the two so separate? Because they don't feel anything alike, really. Again, they are two separate personalities, but a lot of that is due to they just didn't interact much, it would appear, right? Like, Aenys and Maegor really don't have any type of relationship that we can tell from Fire and Blood until Aenys becomes king. And then they rule together for, you know, like I think 2 years, and that's about it. But it just seems very dumb to me that Aegon didn't do that. Like, he didn't take the necessary precautions to make sure that the two lines were secure. Because you would have thought, okay, you're having two wives, it's a little sketchy when it comes to succession. Like, yes, Aenys, by all the laws, is supposed to come first. But what if the other brother, after you're gone, is stronger and has more power? Well, what's going to happen then? And another thing that maybe Aegon didn't foresee happening was Maegor actually getting his dragon, Balerion, right? That doesn't happen, obviously, until after Aegon's death. So maybe Aegon didn't view Maegor as big of a threat to the line because he only had Visenya's sword. He only had Dark Sister at the time, so he didn't have Blackfire or Balerion, so that's also possible. But again, I think also you have to think about Visenya would have been on Maegor's side in regards to pretty much anything that happened, right? And she has Vhagar, the second largest dragon. So, I don't know. It just seems like maybe it's hindsight that I'm looking at this and I'm going, wow, that was kind of stupid, Aegon. Why didn't you, like, help reconcile the two sides? And the thing is, right, like, it wasn't like there wasn't an opportunity to do so. Right, because there was a chance that they could have unified the lines. The way that this would have been done, and the way it would have made Visenya happy, and probably Maegor happy as well, would have been by marrying Rhaena to Maegor. Now, Rhaena was quite younger, so it would have had to have been a betrothal to Maegor. It wouldn't have been a marriage right away. It would have had to wait for a number of years. But this doesn't happen. Everyone seems to go against this. And I find it interesting because we know the reason why. The reason why is because the faith, right? If this would have happened here, it could have caused some issues for the Targaryens right away. Because think about it. Remember, the reason a lot of this stuff doesn't creep up, like with the faith, is two reasons. One is because Aegon is still here. You don't really want to piss him off. Like it's said in Fire and Blood that they didn't condone Aegon's actions, like his marriage with his sister wives and stuff like that, but they also didn't accept it either. They didn't say it was legal. So they were kind of in an in-between. They were kind of waiting for that next domino to fall to then start condemning the Targaryens. So part of it was Aegon was still too powerful. They didn't really want to upset him at this time. Remember, there's a lot of things. Remember, when Aegon goes to the Old Town, mysteriously, the doors are open and they don't fight. So, again, they didn't really want to fight him. The second part of it is there wasn't really any marriages to look at and go, yeah, we can really condemn that, right? Like, Aenys ends up marrying a cousin. That's not too bad. In Westeros, that kind of happens a lot. Like, think about Tywin and his cousin, Joanna. So, nothing too bad there. So it only starts to prickle up when Maegor possibly could have been betrothed to Rhaena. And this would have been a very smart move, in my opinion. It would have tied both of the lines together. Now, would this have solved the issue? That I'm not as certain on, right? Because eventually, still, the same thing would have resulted in happening. Aenys would have came to become king. His son Aegon would have been the heir, but we still would have had an issue, right? We would have had an issue once again. Because when Aenys dies, would Maegor still have just taken the crown anyway because he could take it by force? So, it is hard to understand what could have happened here because we know that Maegor was probably barren and he would have taken more wives regardless. So what could have occurred here actually could have made it even worse. If Rhaena's not giving him any children, would that have also screwed that up, like made it even more, a lot of tension between both sides if he cast away, like, for instance, Rhaena? Possibly. So, again, I think the idea, though, is, like, we know that with hindsight, that wouldn't have worked, right? We know with hindsight, Rhaena and Maegor would not have been a good match just because of what happens later. But I think without hindsight, logically, this would have been a good choice. You unite both claims. Visenya is not on Aegon's back or Aenys' back nearly as much because Maegor is much higher in the succession because of that marriage at the time. And so I think it could have been a beneficial marriage. But again, I think the biggest problem that I want to really harp on is Aegon really did nothing to try and basically make both groups happy. He kind of let those things fester and just didn't even worry about it to a degree. And he also didn't even help try and make Maegor a better person. Try to teach him skills that are maybe counterintuitive to what Visenya was telling him, to make him more well-rounded. And maybe you're thinking, oh, well, maybe Maegor was too far gone and Aegon realized that. Well, I disagree, right? I think Aegon does not seem like he was present in Maegor's life from a very early age, and so all he got was Visenya. If Aegon had been more of a parent to Maegor, that could have helped balance those things out, right? Think about Joffrey. Joffrey becomes the person that he is. A lot of the reason is because he only really has Cersei. Robert is not really a father to him. His real father, and Jaime, can't be that person, so he really just has Cersei. So think about how Joffrey could have been maybe different if he had a better parent, right? To bounce those ideas off of and create more of a complete character. And that's my biggest problem with Aegon as a person. And yes, I want to keep in mind that Aegon had a lot of things going on at the time, right? Again, the first part of this, you also have the First Dornish War. Again, Maegor is born around at the end of that time. You also have other things going on, whether that's making the realm whole at this point. For instance, Aegon was not really in Dragonstone or would become King's Landing for about half of the year. He would be traveling the country, trying to basically keep the country together. His first priority was peace. And I think something that History Westeros brings up that I think is very important to understand is I think Aegon was trying to establish a peace for now. That was his major goal. It was not the peace for the future. It was establishing and to start off his reign of peace. And that kind of had its repercussions in the way he dealt with things like the faith, Aenys and Maegor, is they didn't get the attention they really deserved or needed. So let me know what you guys think about Aegon as a parent. I think that's one of his biggest pitfalls was the way that he treated Aenys and Maegor, because even Aenys, it seems like he did try to make Aenys prepared, but it didn't go well, right? Like Aenys was too soft. He wasn't decisive. He wasn't strong enough to become king. And so I think Aenys as a character is not inherently a bad person, right? He doesn't strike me as a bad person. Like there's a lot of US presidents that don't strike you as bad people, but they were not the right fit for a president. And that's kind of what Aenys strikes me as. He strikes me as someone that was not able to be decisive and all of that. And the question I have, and this is why I find a TV show that maybe covers some of Aenys' early life and Maegor's early life, is what did Aegon tell Aenys? Like, did he give Aenys the instructions of, you need to be decisive, you can't pester, you can't fester on what decision you're going to make, you've got to be decisive and figure out what you're going to do? It just seems like a lot of that was missing, and that's a little bit more speculation because Aenys was with Aegon much more, whereas Maegor we know wasn't, right? Just based off of where characters were. So let me know what you guys all think about this video, and also let me know if you do want to see another video on Aegon and kind of this time period with the faith. But thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.